Welcome to my companion DVD for my new book, Watercolor, Whatever Works. I'm really excited about planning to show you how to mix traditional and non-traditional approaches in both watercolor and mixed media. In other words, I'm going to show you how to have lots of fun. This DVD offers step-by-step demos and a way for you to watch the techniques and see what will work for you. I've selected many demos to make the book more user-friendly. Hopefully, this DVD will provide the tools you need to make your own paintings more unique. So what do you say? Let's get started. Well, here we are. We're going to get started with the landscape theme. And really, now think about it. You really have to give yourself permission to get out those paints and start playing and start exploring. My plan is to start with some of the traditional compositional guidelines and then move into the more non-traditional approaches. For example, when you're out on location painting, the first thing you want to do is a sketch. And what we end up doing is painting every tile and every window and just way too much stuff. So what I'd like to suggest is that you start to think about just using some broken lines, not static, that gets boring, and more suggestion and less detail. So for example, if I come in here and draw some of these bricks as positive shapes, you can see what I'm doing. These are just positive shapes. And then if I continue this by doing what would be the negative shape, in other words, the mortar. How cool is that? So you've got both the positive and the negative. And then what I try to do is come in and even do some of the dark patterns, little dots, dashes, any little lines that will make it more interesting. And what you're doing actually is you are creating a movement. You're guiding the viewer through the picture plane. And then when it comes time to paint it, not only do you want to come in and paint in these dark mortar lines and some of the bricks, you want to leave some of the bricks unpainted. So for example, what I like to do is I like to paint some of the bricks that I've drawn, and then I like to paint a few bricks that I didn't draw, just to add a little bit more interest to the whole thing. So that's a good start. Think about the movement. Think about saying less with more. A busy scene like a market scene, what happens very often, or in any composition, we move in so fast. We make these really straight lines that just shoot us into the picture. And so I like to have these shapes that are like stepping stones, that are little shapes that move you into the focal area. So here you can see I've just taken that same sketch and I'm starting to paint a few of the colors to lead you in. The yellows going into oranges, into the reds. And then my whole plan is to keep in the focal area the darkest darks, the brightest brights, and surround the focal area with all this energy. And just use these as stepping stones to lead you in. Now stairs are one of my favorites. I love stairs. And the more interesting the stairs, the more I like it. And again, with stairs, one of the things you can do is you can create movement. Movement is so important. So for example, in these steps, if I start coming in and drawing some of the mortar lines, this would be like the negative one that we just talked about. And then maybe a few of the positive shapes as well. And then what I can do, this would be like a positive shape. This would be like a negative shape leading us up. And see, what I'm doing is I'm creating movement every time these mortar shapes connect and move through the picture. You're leading the viewer to what will become the focal area. So I'm starting here, leading us through, and at this point now, I'm ready to Maybe add some foliage, some interlocking shapes, some pots of flowers, so that you're being led up to the subject. And eventually, you can see I've added more pots of flowers and kind of zigzagged off the top of the composition. So stairs are great. Another exciting area to work with are like roof lines. Very often in these little villages, I climb to the very top just so I'm looking down at the roof lines. And very often when I start painting these roof lines and some of the bricks and chimneys, I feel like I'm reconstructing the entire village. So I have to force myself to start thinking about, how can I make this simplified? How can I just show the essence of what's here, and then the rest of it just can remain as lines, dots, little broken shapes, so that you're actually leading the viewer through this composition, not in a photographic journey, but in an artistic journey. And for example, when I start putting in these lines for the tiles, look at how every one ends at a different point. That's an important thing to keep in mind. If you draw them all perfectly, it's boring. But by having some of them just nothing but a line, a little broken shape, maybe starting to suggest more detail as you come to a focal area. In this case, these chimneys, this area, more detail. That connects to more detail. That connects, so that you're leading the viewer through the picture. Now here you can see I've started with the actual painting of this subject. And one of the things I like to do when I start this painting is to start with, for example, some of the lighter colors on the edge. This happens to be some raw sienna, a nice light color, perfect for those villages and tiles. Then I might move into a little bit brighter color. This would be like some quinacridone gold, a little bit brighter, but still appropriate. And then I might start moving into some brighter color. This happens to be like Windsor orange. And eventually I would get into the actual tile color as we're getting closer to the subject here. This happens to be quinacridone burnt orange, close to the most interesting area. And then I might even mix in a little alizarin crimson to make it even redder and a little bit brighter. So these are just suggestions. You can do it with the lines, you can do it with the color, but the important thing is not to overdo it. Again, to use that same phrase, you can say more with less.